Hi, I'm Jason Karp with the Public Safety Network, and welcome to PSN's News of the Week on PSN at Home. I'm here with my colleague and friend, Mr. Thomas Jefferson Kennedy, known as TJ. What's up, TJ?
Hey, Jason. It's been a good week. Some crazy stuff in the news this week for public safety, and looking forward to covering some of the highlights here today.
Yeah, man, there's a lot going on. So let's start a little bit with some of the COVID news, really a sobering statistic. According to the Uniform Firefighters Association, approximately 24% of FDNY's firefighters and members have contracted COVID. I mean, that's just crazy. That's about 3,000 members. So, people who are watching, this stuff is real. I mean, this is real for communities. This is particularly real for our first responders. And that's a real sobering, kind of note. And I think it's just really important for people to understand how it's affecting people all over the country, and particularly in places like New York.
I mean, these places that are hardest hit, it's just incredible the impact on firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and EMTs, and not just them, but their entire families. I mean, often they're having to quarantine at a fire station, they're having to quarantine at a friend's home or a cabin or some other location, their temporary housing. Just a huge impact on their entire extended family. And they're really just taking care of us. And so we owe them a debt of gratitude, and the statistics are horrible, and we're not through even the first big wave of this yet. So there's a lot more yet to come.
No, absolutely. And it's so critical that everyone's taking precautions. And well, I joked earlier about having the hand sanitizer and the wipes and all. It's, we need to follow the guidance, and really important to knock this thing out. So, but great thanks to everybody who's putting their lives on the line, and the first responders and the folks in the healthcare community. We are greatly appreciative for all your efforts, and really looking forward to you staying safe and staying healthy.
Yeah, and just one last point on this that I think is important is, personal protective equipment for our first responders. And there's still problems with having enough PPE, as it's referred to, for firefighters, paramedics, police officers, and others. And we just need to take care of them. It's one thing to have them risk their lives and go to work in this environment every day. It's another thing to ensure that they have the appropriate personal protective equipment when they do it, and that it's clean, and that it's going to work in between different calls, and all the things that, just A, make sense, B, are the right thing to do, and C, we have to do to keep our first responders safe. So I implore all of you out there that have an impact on that, whether you're manufacturing PPE, whether you're the federal, state, or local government that need to provide that PPE to agencies, whether you're the private companies that are running an EMS service or other things, we have to provide the right personal protective equipment for all of our first responders every day, and we need to continue to replenish that, and that should be our first focus.
Absolutely. Well said, TJ. So kind of moving on to, something similar, right? In this age of COVID, we're seeing a lot more discussion of telemedicine and telehealth. And recently, GEMS came out with a study of paramedics and EMTs in Marin County. And I think it's just really interesting about use of telemedicine and their reaction to employing telemedicine into their everyday activities. There's 3 major hospitals, I guess, out in Marin County. They have about 15,000 transports per year. They're all stroke centers. And the results are, I think, what you would expect, although at the time, Marin County they hadn't implemented any telehealth solutions in their EMS operations. But the bottom line from what, the study said is the responses are that there's no doubt that telemedicine and telehealth is critical, and that it can be extremely beneficial to patient safety and to improving outcomes. And that's what you would think. But there are some caveats, and this is, I think, something interesting that we should point out, and it's important for people to consider. So the 3 big concerns that were raised were, one, when you're working in the back of the ambulance, obviously it's the noise level and being able to communicate. But the second, which I think is critical and something near and dear to our hearts, was cited, was connectivity issues and the ability to send real-time video and audio. And then basically the third issue was ease of use and the ability to integrate with provider workflow systems. So, while we see, I think, what is going to be the new normal, right? And as we get through COVID and see more and more telehealth, not just from doctors' offices, but in the field with paramedics and EMTs, these issues need to be solved. right? So, I mean, TJ, we're out doing this stuff all the time. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And, what do you see as some of the solutions? And, how can we ensure that, we're, folks are getting the kinds of technology they need to make this happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's 2020, and telemedicine and the ability to do this remotely in an ambulance in a patient's home still has existed for years. But it's simple now. I mean, there are platforms as a service, one buttons, single, simple connectivity platforms like Alario and others that can do this today. There are communication platforms like Pulsera and others that can literally make the communication connection of real-time video to emergency rooms, to cardiac centers, to on-call personnel, to attending physicians, to any of the staff that needs to have that communication. And it just works. And that's the real goal, I think, when we're talking about our emergency medical service responders, is that we need to give them tools that are simple and easy to use, and give them that ability that ensures they'll have connectivity as a platform. Also, cost-wise, all of this stuff is available as a service today, and so there's no reason it shouldn't be implemented quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great point. And speaking of connectivity, a lot going on with Firstnet these days, I hear. So what do we got going on there?
Yeah, I mean, some big announcements just here in the last week, and I think they're quite pertinent for all of us who spent a lot of time working on trying to make Firstnet successful. I'm always proud when I hear the numbers continue to grow and the use and adoption of Firstnet continues to expand. Topped over 1.3 million, first responder connections, and over 12,000 agencies now that have, chosen to move to the Firstnet network. And to me, that's pretty impressive. I think on top of that, it's about a 30% increase in subscribers just in the last 4 months. Goes to show how important this network is, and how important it was to get this network deployed and having all the key features, priority and preemption, before some of the huge things we've seen now with the pandemic. And I think if we could have looked back to a few years ago, we were talking to Chief Harlan McEwen this week, one of the things we always worried about was some kind of, even bigger than the typical wildland fire and hurricanes that we know we have every single year, but a nationwide or huge regional disaster, that this network would be in place and be able to perform. And it is. And it's just so exciting to see the growth of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect storm, right? I mean, I remember, back in the day, us talking about these exact kinds of things. And, this is why, Firstnet was created, right? I mean, the whole concept and this and, other public safety grade networks, are just so critical. So yeah, it's an awesome thing. I mean, and hopefully first responders are out taking advantage of these and seeing the difference that it can make.
Yeah, I mean, just think of the areas that are hardest hit right now. Typically a lot of urban centers, typically a lot of places where there's a lot of patients, whether it's nursing homes, whether it's places where people are close together. And the fact that, the amount of communication that's needed and the ability to do remote patient care and telemedicine and other things that need to happen, you need to make sure you have priority and preemption and encryption to make sure it's done safely. And these abilities all exist, and they're available to every single first responder. And so it's a great time to leverage this technology to make them safer in what they do each and every day.
Yeah, and TJ, I mean, tell us also a little bit, like how is Firstnet handling, those rural areas, those areas where communications may be down, right? I mean, for folks have questions about that, and when you get west of the Mississippi and all the issues, as a former Utah state trooper, and how is Firstnet dealing with that? Because we know that no network is, fully ubiquitous in terms of infrastructure.
Sure. I mean, a network is very dynamic. And I mean, I don't know how many thousands of new sites have gone up to help support the Firstnet build just over the past few years, but thousands and thousands of additional new sites, certainly thousands of sites getting new and advanced hardware. And that makes such a huge difference to go much further into rural America than the networks did before. But they also have a fleet of 76 dedicated deployables, and they have 3 airborne aerial systems that are able to bring the network to unique places that don't have connectivity today. They even have an aerostat, or what's typically known as a blimp, out there today. And so they've been deploying with a lot of these COVID deployments, whether it's temporary hospitals, whether it's the ships coming into LA or New York, and having the ability to extend those networks in big cities where there may be a lot of density needed, and they're able to go out to rural areas. And I think we're going to see more and more rural areas hit as this wave continues to move across America with the pandemic. and all they have to do is make one phone call and they can get that support. And it's a nationwide asset. It's an asset that allows the economies of scale to help make sure that happens, and it's not a cost to an individual agency to make that occur. So I think that's a huge benefit to our first responders.
I'm just stuck back on the blimp. I think that is super cool.
It's cool. I mean, blimps are cool. Tethered blimps, having the ability. I mean, obviously, the higher up it gets, the more coverage you're going to get for a particular area for a big incident. And even tethered drones are pretty cool. It's amazing the amount of bandwidth that can go through that thing, and how quickly they can be deployed. I think that's one of the fast things. It's just like, who thought you could build a cell tower in less than 2 hours, right?
Yeah, just think about it. I mean, they could partner with Goodyear, right? You get a whole cadre of blimps, and really expand the communications network. So, the ideas are always coming, here.
Yes,
so,
they are.
Absolutely. Read this week about Banjo, and a new startup company that's been employing artificial intelligence and doing video analysis, and was working with the state of Utah. Well, apparently, turns out that their I guess CEO many moons ago was associated with the Ku Klux Klan and was engaged in some anti-Semitic activities. I guess decades ago now, and I understand that very remorseful, and that he was a young kid at the time, but from what I understand, Utah has now pulled that contract, and I think there's general controversy about use of AI and video. Facial recognition anyway, but then when you talk about potential for racial or other bias, this kind of exacerbates that issue. So I just thought it was interesting. Unfortunately, a little bit disturbing, although but just an interesting turn of events.
No, you're right. I mean, it is disturbing news, and I think that on multiple fronts, and I think that some of the reach outs I've had from my public safety friends in Utah is the reality is AI, artificial intelligence, and things we're doing in public safety to help provide public safety services are controversial already. I think adding individual backgrounds that call this into question just makes that even more difficult. I think it's really important, though, that we focus on the kinds of checks and balances that are needed, the kinds of ethics boards that are needed to ensure that we don't have bias being built into AI, especially on the law enforcement side, and that any kind of bias could really change the outcome of the kinds of things that are going on there, and that we have the appropriate checks and balances in these systems. And as you know, we're both huge fans of technology for improving public safety, but we have to make sure that it's done right. And this news definitely, raised this question even more this week, and for appropriate reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I mean, it's an important issue and something we all need to be cognizant of. Okay, on that sobering note, we're going to move to something a little bit lighter. Some really fun stories that are going on here, and every week I think we're going to try to pick a story that just wows us because of some factor that makes it just unique or crazy or just plain old stupid. And we're going to give it the WOW Award. So I'm going to go through a list here. TJ, you're not going to believe this one. So this guy in Florida calls 911, says his emergency. Police show up, and his emergency is he wants to hand them a $20 bill so that they can go get him some liquor.
Definitely not a good thing to call the police for.
Now, I've been in situations where that rides the line. That could be an emergency. I mean,
could be an emergency for some people, but I'm guessing that the officers that responded were not amused.
They were not amused, and so here's what happened. They basically said, "Don't do that again," and most people wouldn't.
Right.
Next day, guess who calls 911?
I'm guessing it's the same guy again.
Officers respond. He doesn't want liquor this time, though. He apparently has trouble getting out of his seat, so he wants them to go into his freezer and retrieve his ice cream. So the good news is this was a true emergency. So,
well, I mean, maybe less ice cream would allow him to get out of his chair.
yeah, exactly. So, but long story short, he was arrested that time. You know, a little abuse of the 911. So,
Yeah,
you
our
know,
911, dispatch, our 911 system, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs and paramedics, they have more important things to be doing, and they will go out on a welfare check, and they will check on folks who are having health issues or can't be reached and can't be contacted. And they do this every single day across obviously the United States and the world for that matter. And at the same point, we just got to be careful not to let this happen. So I'm kind of glad that was highlighted in the news this week as an example of what not to do.
let's just, come on, people. Come on.
Real.
Let's use 911 for what it's supposed to be used for. All right. Thank you. Other cool stuff going on. DOD, right? They made an announcement this week.
I saw some really cool video on TV this week.
Man, what are they calling it? The unidentified aerial phenomenon.
It just doesn't match up with UFOs to me. Is that the same thing?
I don't know. That might have, they may have mistaken you when you were a life flight paramedic for one of those.
There you go.
Especially when you're hanging out of the copter.
Fun days.
But so but apparently, unidentified aerial phenomenon. DoD they released footage, and interesting, the I guess pilots who had seen this. Listen to this quote. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots out of the west, he marveled. Look at that thing, dude.
It's official commentary from the United States.
That's official commentary for the unidentified flying phenomenon, which, I don't know. So I've heard some say that maybe they're responsible for this whole COVID thing. They're just trying to reduce the world population numbers before they take over the planet.
That's craziness.
I don't know. I mean, I'm all up for conspiracies. No?
I don't believe you, but I do think it's a nice distraction from all the other negative news that we have, that we do have aliens that are coming for a visit, and maybe they could have a vaccine with them.
Yeah, well, exactly. Or, next story is kind of more like divine intervention. So Zoom, we're using Zoom, right? Everybody's using Zoom.
Or other tools. I mean, not that Zoom's the only tool out there.
No. There's lots of others. Of course, Microsoft and Google and plenty of other.
You could even choose to have secured communications, and you wouldn't have people Zoom bombing you.
Absolutely. Secure communications. But what's interesting about Zoom's announcement this week is they selected a new cloud provider, and of course, you can imagine the amount of data that they're having to deal with these days. So they selected Oracle, which I just thought was interesting. Obviously with the big three, with AWS and Microsoft Azure and Google, they went with Oracle. And the only thing, I'm thinking, why would they do this? The only thing I could think of is that given all of the challenges they've had, announcements with data and security, that, I guess maybe they were looking for some divine intervention. So they went with an Oracle. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it has to be divine intervention, because it wasn't in my top three if I were to try to go figure out what cloud I wanted to be on. But, divine intervention could help. And, they have that good news business problem. They have lots of demand, and that's a good thing. And they're reacting to that. And they have a number of other issues that they're working on improving. And I get a lot of Zoom updates on software pretty often right now going on as well.
No, absolutely. So, a lot going on there, and obviously all of these video conferencing companies have to adjust, and important that we have the right security and right bandwidth to accommodate, it's apparently, going to be, at least for some period of time, the new normal. So moving back to the stupidity category, recently there was some intelligence on a home. I think it was in Florida. I can't remember now, but
on coast of Florida, I think, if I heard that right.
Yeah, I think that's right. So we're back in Florida. So there seems to be a trend here with Florida, and maybe not the brightest in criminals, but there was some intelligence about a potential, some drug trafficking going on, and an individual bought a new welcome mat, and the welcome mat apparently said, and I quote, "Come back with a warrant."
Who buys a welcome mat that says "come back with a warrant" besides maybe a drug dealer?
Apparently a drug dealer. So that's exactly what the police did. And they got their warrant, and guess what they found?
Drugs.
Drugs. As they call, and referred to this gentleman as the poison peddler. And so he was taunting the police. They called his bluff, and they've now taken those drugs off the street, and I expect that that person is sitting in a small cell right about now. So,
I would say that's one of those perfect, like, here's your sign, right?
yeah,
Back when
exactly.
they weren't. We did.
Exactly. Here's your sign. So anyway, on that note, that's pretty much the news of the week. This is our first episode of PSN Now on PSN at Home. We want to end on a fun note and a positive note. I think something inspirational that really celebrates everything that all of our first responders and healthcare professionals are doing for us all, today and every day, right?
Yeah, I just love this video when I saw it. I think everybody will really enjoy it.
America, America, God shed His grace on me and crowned my good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
So that was Kim Tavares of Boston PD, who just took it upon herself to share her gift. How awesome was that?
Just an incredible gift, and I love seeing our police officers in uniform, our firefighters, our paramedics, and others when they are just so talented, and they're able to, especially at this unique time, share such an important gift with the rest of us, and that really shows how human they are and how much they have to give to our communities.
Absolutely. So anyway, with that, we want to thank everybody for tuning in to PSN Now. I'm Jason Karp.
I'm TJ Kennedy, and we look forward to doing this again next week.